Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The new variant of coronavirus found in Britain is seen in more countries around the world. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres describes 2020 as a year of trials, tragedies, and tears. Plus, thousands march against the Nepalese Prime Minister's decision to dissolve the country's parliament. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia here in Lagos. More than 80 million people around the world have contracted the coronavirus as we speak, and there have been over 1.7 million fatalities. Well, that's according to the World Health Organization. While the United States still has the single highest number of cases and deaths, a new worry is brooding over the world as new variants of the pandemic are springing up. Pakistan has become the latest country to report cases of the new variant, which was first detected in the UK. Health authorities in Sindh province say 3 people in the southern port city of Karachi had tested positive for the new strain, and all 3 had recently returned home from the UK. Now, Germany is learning that the coronavirus strain that was detected in the UK has been retrospectively found in an older man who died of the disease in Germany last month. Here's the global update.
Global COVID-19 cases are being pushed higher by cases in individual countries, and governments have been doing their best to curb the numbers. In South Africa, the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has announced new tougher coronavirus restrictions after the country surpassed 1 million COVID-19 cases over the weekend. The measures include an overnight curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., as well as bans on indoor and outdoor gatherings and alcohol sales. He says the country is at an extremely dangerous point in the pandemic, and action has to be taken as some hospitals and medical centers struggle under a huge rise in admissions. Iran has launched human trials of its first domestic COVID-19 vaccine candidate, which Tehran says could help it defeat the pandemic despite U.S. sanctions interfering with its ability to import vaccines. Setad, a giant state-affiliated conglomerate controlled by the country's supreme leader, says production of the vaccine developed by one of its companies, Shifa Pharmed, could reach 12 million doses per month, 6 months after successful trial ends. Turkey says it is aiming to produce Russia's Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine domestically, but has asked for more information about it before inoculating its citizens. Russia has announced several international deals for the supply of Sputnik V, named after the Soviet-era satellite that triggered the space race in a nod to the project's geopolitical importance for Moscow. Indonesia is poised to secure coronavirus vaccines from Pfizer and AstraZeneca as it awaits authorization to begin its inoculation program with a third drug. A 50 million dose deal with AstraZeneca will be finalized before the end of the year, and one of the same size with Pfizer in the first week of January. The AstraZeneca vaccines are estimated to arrive in the second quarter of 2021, and those of Pfizer in third quarter of 2021. South Korea's presidential office says it will sign a deal with Moderna Incorporated to offer COVID-19 vaccines for 20 million people. It intends to begin its vaccinations in February, with health workers and vulnerable people first in line, but the government has been criticized for that schedule in light of vaccinations underway in the United States and in the European Union. Dubai is planning to inoculate 70% of its population with the COVID-19 vaccine produced by Pfizer and BioNTech by the end of 2021, in a campaign free of charge for citizens and residents. The UAE began the first phase of the vaccination campaign last week, targeting priority groups, including those 60 and older, people with chronic medical conditions, those with disabilities, and frontline workers. The second phase would kick off in April and will be open to all citizens and residents. BioNTech said it has received emergency use approval from Germany's health authority for its quick COVID-19 test that it says is as reliable as widely used PCR tests, but delivers results almost as quickly as an antigen 1. Biotech firm GNA Biosolutions says the test is based on a new class of the polymerase chain reaction, which has become the global standard of reliable testing. Its so-called amplification technology had proven to deliver 96.7% accurate results. Its so-called amplification technology had proven to deliver 96.7% accurate results.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the House of Representatives has voted in favor of President Donald Trump's wish to have the new coronavirus stimulus package increased from $600 to $2,000. Democrats in the House passed the bill with the support of more than 40 Republican members. However, many Republicans are concerned about the financial burden of increased aid. In another development, the House also voted to override President Trump's veto of a $740 billion defense bill, which was passed by Congress earlier this month. That bill will now move to the Senate. Staying in the United States, President-elect Joe Biden has accused the U.S. Defense Department of what he calls irresponsibility for failing to give his team the information needed for the transition of power. Mr. Biden says he has encountered obstruction from the political leadership, but a Pentagon spokesman says it has been completely transparent. Mr. Biden takes office on the 20th of January, but President Trump has refused to concede. For weeks after the 3rd of November election, Mr. Biden was blocked from receiving key intelligence briefings, an essential and normally routine part of a presidential transition.
For some agencies, our teams received exemplary cooperation from the career staff in those agencies. From others, most notably the Department of Defense, we encountered obstruction from the political leadership of that department. And the truth is, many of the agencies that are critical to our security have incurred enormous damage. Many of them have been hollowed out in personnel, capacity, and in morale, in the policy processes that have atrophied or have been sidelined, in the despair of our alliances and the disrepair of those alliances.
Channels Television's Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, so let's talk more about this relief bill. It is passed voting in the House, but the Senate still has to sign off on it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's likely people will not be getting their checks this week.
You're exactly correct. I mean, we're now at Tuesday, and the end of the week here is really going to be closer to New Year's Eve. So we're not looking at Friday as even being a potential day as a work day. So we're in the midst of the holiday season here in the United States, and I know across the world as well. And so having a check being received before the end of the week is highly unlikely. As you stated before, Senate still needs to approve this bill, and so that might take throughout the day. Once that bill is approved and makes it through Senate, we're looking at it going back to the president to be signed. And at that time, we're then going to be looking at the execution of being able to start processing the checks and obviously the benefits that are related to this bill as well. So we're looking at next week at the earliest time. It's highly unlikely that the president will be able to even sign the bill today. It's more likely tomorrow or Thursday, just depending on what happens with the Senate. So we are in a very tight situation. There are many people that are looking for benefits. Unemployment benefits are running out. We are ending a year, and people would like to start the new year in a way that they know that they can at least support their families and also begin on a better start than what most of 2020 meant for many Americans.
Well, President-elect Joe Biden has spoken a number of times since the election about the roadblocks he and his campaign team have been experiencing with the Trump administration in regards to the transition of power. So what could happen if he continues to experience these roadblocks right up until the inauguration?
The greatest concern is going to be national security. And I think that's been the greatest concern since election night, when we saw where it was headed, and actually a couple days after election night where we saw what was happening. And when we spent weeks and weeks without any type of information coming from the president's administration to the Biden-Harris campaign teams and their transition teams. So we're in a position now that even if we do get a little better cooperation over the next couple of weeks before January 20th, we are in a very vulnerable position as it relates to national security. And so I think that the president-elect is just trying to ensure and let Americans know that this is not going to be an easy process once we get to January 20th, because there's going to be a lot of catching up to do. And we could be in a position from a Defense Department standpoint that many of the informations that are needed to be able to ensure for a smooth transition with national security could be compromised. And so he is really letting the alarm be known to Americans and also to the Trump administration.
All right. Well, Maria, thanks so much for joining us today, and have a great evening.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we are only 48 hours away from 2021 in this part of the world, and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres already has his New Year message out. He hopes 2021 will bring rays of hope and is encouraging the world to work in unity and solidarity against the backdrop of a year dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the persistent grief that it's brought with it.
2020 has been a year of trials, tragedies, and tears. COVID-19 upended our lives and plunged the world into suffering and grief. So many loved ones have been lost, and the pandemic rages on, creating new waves of sickness and death. Poverty, inequality, and hunger are rising. Jobs are disappearing and debts are mounting. Children are struggling. Violence in the home is increasing and insecurity is everywhere. But the new year lies ahead, and with it we see rays of hope. People extending a helping hand to neighbors and strangers. Frontline workers giving their all. Scientists developing vaccines in record time. Countries making new commitments to prevent climate catastrophe. If we work together in unity and solidarity, these rays of hope can reach around the world. That's the lesson of this most difficult year. Both climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic are crises that can only be addressed by everyone together as part of a transition to an inclusive and sustainable future. The central ambition of the United Nations for 2021 is to build a global coalition for carbon neutrality, net zero emissions by 2050. Every government, city, business, and individual can play a part in achieving this vision. Together, let's make peace among ourselves and with nature, tackle the climate crisis, stop the spread of COVID-19, and make 2021 a year of healing.
Croatians in the capital, Zagreb, are still reeling from the impact of a 6.4 magnitude earthquake that struck early this morning. According to the GFZ, German Research Center for Geoscience, the quake hit at a depth of 10 kilometers. The epicenter was in the town of Petrinja, 50 kilometers south of the Croatian capital. Army troops were later sent to areas hit by the quake to help, while the Prime Minister, Andrej Plenković, arrived at the scene where piles of stone, bricks, and tiles littered the streets in the aftermath. It was only yesterday a magnitude 5.2 quake hit central Croatia, also near Perchna. Back in March, a magnitude 5.3 hit Zagreb, causing one death and injuring 27 people. Still ahead on The World Today. The fashion world rocked by the death of fashion legend Pierre Cardin. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We've seen a lot of crazy weather all over the world this year, mostly attributed to climate change. In areas where winter weather has begun, people don't seem to mind the dropping temperatures.
We begin in Germany, where children and families did not seem to mind the huge snow dumped on cities this year, instead choosing to make the most of it. In the area of Taunus, children played in the snow and took sleigh rides on the white slopes of the forest, while others went skiing or built a snowman. While many are concerned about coronavirus, they said they will observe the protocols but will still enjoy the snow. In Milan, Italy, residents woke up to heavy snowfall blanketing their city. The crystalline silence was felt in the city as snow hit overnight and in the early hours of the morning, leaving a white layer covering the financial hub and bringing a Christmassy feel to the iconic Duomo Square by the cathedral. Hundreds of Britons spending the holidays in the Swiss ski resort of Verbier fled the village to avoid quarantine rules put in place by the Switzerland government after the discovery of a new strain of the coronavirus in the United Kingdom. You would think they will have preferred staying indoors, but braver ones took to the ski slopes while others engaged in snowball fights. North and northwest China have been experiencing the strongest cold waves this winter, bringing large drops in temperature and icy conditions across the regions. Temperature plunged to minus 40 degrees Celsius on Monday morning in Fuyuan County of northwest Xinjiang Autonomous Region, challenging the local agriculture and husbandry. The freezing cold front has brought a sharp temperature drop and strong winds in Beijing since Monday, as the temperature dropped to minus 6 degrees Celsius, compared with 2 degrees Celsius on Monday and 7.5 degrees Celsius on Sunday. Hebei province issued 2 blue alerts for cold wave and strong winds on Monday, as Guangping County saw temperatures drop to minus 7 degrees Celsius.
Look at how intense.
Finally, winter storm dropping as much as 1.5 inches of rain in lowland areas and as much as 16 inches of snow in the hills and mountains hit California on Monday. The storm arrived early on Monday, bringing winds, some hail, and thunderstorms, and some flooding, driven by a cold front pushing east off the Pacific and into Arizona.
The people of Nepal are showing they are not happy about the Prime Minister's decision to dissolve Parliament and call for early elections. Thousands of them expressed their displeasure with a march through the streets of Kathmandu. The protesters say Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's decision was unconstitutional. They rallied outside of his office despite the coronavirus restrictions on gatherings. Oli says internal squabbling and a lack of cooperation from his party has paralyzed decision-making, forcing him to seek a fresh popular mandate. Well, what a year 2020 has been. A year the world has lost many icons, celebrities, family, and loved ones. And sadly, the fashion industry has been forced to say goodbye to French courtier Pierre Cardin, who made his name by selling designer clothes to the masses, and his fortune by being the first to exploit the name as a brand for selling everything from cars to perfume. Cardin died today at the age of 98. In a career spanning more than 60 years, Cardin drew scorn and admiration from fellow fashion designers for his brash business sense. He maintained that he built his business empire without ever asking for a bank for a loan. Cardin was the first designer to sell clothes collections in department stores in the late 1950s and the first to enter the licensing business for perfumes, accessories, and even food, now a major profit driver for many fashion houses. Hard as it may be to imagine decades later, Armani chocolates, Bulgari house hotels, and Gucci sunglasses are all based on Cardin's realization that a fashion brand's glamour had endless merchandising potential. Joining us now is founder of Afro Fashion Milan and co-founder of Black Lives Matter in Italian Fashion, Michelle Ngomo. Michelle, thank you for joining us from Milan, Italy.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for having me today.
So, a great loss to the fashion community. How is it reacting to the news of Cardin's demise?
I think it's a really sad day for the fashion industry today because, you know, Pierre Cardin was a legend, one of the greatest French couturiers of all the time. Let's say that he was a pioneer of the prêt-à-porter, like you say in English, guys, ready to wear. Let's remember something really, really important in his life. He was the son of Italian immigrants and his brand is present in more than 100 countries in all over the world. Why is it so important that he was the son of an immigrant? For me, at least, it's important because that his history teach us that it doesn't matter where you're coming from or where you're living. You have to keep working really, really hard and to keep what you want to achieve in your mind. He participated to the renewal of the haute couture in France alongside André Courrèges and Paco Rabanne. Like you said before, he was a self-made man. So yes, I think the fashion industry is really, really mourning right now.
Well, Pierre Cardin was a designer who revolutionized fashion with the iconic bubble dress in 1954, and as you mentioned, groundbreaking ready-to-wear collections for both men and women. So talk to us about how these pieces are still relevant today and how much more impact Cardin made during his life.
Cardin was 60 years ahead of us. He was a futurist. The landmark Cosmo collection of 1964, I think, with tunics and the hose and both men and women, was a confident statement about unisex clothing. It anticipated the masculine, feminine fashion standard that dominated the second half of the 20th centuries. Androgynous fashion. He started a movement, and right now, when I'm talking with you, I remember that he released an interview with the New York Times. I don't remember very well the year, when he was saying that when he started to draw in 1960, people were laughing at him. They were thinking that he was crazy, and no one wanted to wear what he was drawing. But now his fashion is still present, and it is still really, really, how do you say, d'actualité, like we said in French. With his draw, he wanted to draw something of the future, to be young, to see that a woman could be free. He wanted to give women in the 1960s a chance to work, to sit, to take the car and drive in his dresses. And right now we can see that his style is still very, very present in the fashion industry.
All right, well, thanks again, Michelle. Truly, Cardin was an icon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you to you.
Well, that is all for The World Today. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.